So we're talking this month about the book "The Seat of the Soul" by Gary Zukov, which is in its 25th year, and they have an anniversary edition out, which is in the bookstore. And it's one of the first spiritual books I read during my Renaissance period, a ways back, and it's been interesting to reread it. As I mentioned last week, seeing some of the things through a very different lens than I did originally, but I think overall there's a lot of really good material in this book. And the new edition has a study guide that's been added and some additional forewords and things like that. So you may know Gary from being on Oprah. He was on with her on her show 36 times, and that may be the record, except for John Travolta or somebody. I don't know, but. I know, it's interesting, isn't it? Showbiz. So the second section of the book is called Creation, and the 4 chapters are intuition, light, and then 2 chapters on intention. So in this section of the book, Gary talks about the creative process. How do things come into manifest form? How do we come into manifest form? How do we participate in that process? And he talks about, in the first section into the second section, he talks about kind of 2 levels of being for humanity. One he calls the 5 sensory being, which is those of us that primarily operate on information from our 5 senses. And then he talks about what he calls multi-sensory beings, or humans. And this is really the addition of what I might call the mystical understanding, where you have a very deep and rich inner life. And that a lot of your information, a lot of your experiencing comes from that. When we're in the 5 sensory mode, which is we're going to be because we live in a physical world, when we're in a 5 sensory mode, we are interacting with the world around us, and we're often in a reactive place within our mind. You know, something happens and you react to it and you think about it, usually in a patterned way. We're very rarely really creative or original in that kind of a mode. We're just kind of, things happen and you react to it and you think about it and, you keep on going. In multisensory, or in the mystical approach, it's where you're doing the inner work to recognize that the way you react is determined by the kind of consciousness or inner mind that you build up. And part of that awareness, that inner awareness that he calls multisensory, is being open to our intuition. We all have intuition. The way I would define intuition is that personal, deep knowledge and awareness that comes from deep within your being. It's only yours. Your intuition is yours. And it's contained at the point at which we become individualized from the collective mind, you might say. And that intuitive knowing is always trying to get into your awareness. It's always trying to rise up through the subconscious mind into the conscious mind. But over time, we tend to, in our conditioning, we tend to be conditioned quite often not to really have a clear channel for that. We tend to block it. And this can happen in a whole variety of ways. When you're a little kid, your parents wanted you to be practical. So if you would sit, you sit there and you get that like 95-yard stare, where you just kind of zoned out, and they'd say, "Hey, snap to, pay attention." Right? Be practical. Don't be a dreamer. And what really they were saying, and that the whole world around us often is saying, is be in the 5 sensory mode full time. Don't be in that inner, because again, they were conditioned the same way, and so forth and so on. There are certainly exceptions to this, but if you look at the world around you, it seems that what dominates most of our behavior is that 5 sensory realm, where things happen to me rather than happening through me or as me. Okay, so he starts off with that idea, and it's important in approaching the idea of intuition. I want to do a little reading because it was too long to put on a slide, or I was too lazy to put it on a slide. But this is from page 62 and 63. He says the five-sensory human must learn primarily through his or her physical experiences, and this learning takes longer because lessons that are learned in this way must come through the density of physical matter. A person that needs to learn the lesson of trust, for example, will experience a distrust of others. This distrust will create misunderstandings, and these will lead to tensions and unpleasant experiences. A five-sensory human will continue to experience the unpleasantness that results from his or her distrust of others until, in this lifetime or another, he or she realizes through interaction with others the source of these unpleasantnesses and takes steps to change it. So in other words, kind of trial and error. If a person is not able to trust, for example, he or she will interpret erroneously the words and actions of others. I don't have to go further. Nobody in here has any trust issues of any kind, do you? Anybody? Nobody? Nobody? Okay. All right. Well, we'll just read it for fun. Somebody on the live stream may. If a wife tells her husband that she must attend a business meeting, although she would like to be with him, and if her husband is unable to trust, he may take her meaning as a rejection or as a signal that her work is more important to her than he is. This misunderstanding results from his inability to accept what his wife has told him, from his inability to trust her. As the wife continually experiences her husband's misunderstandings, they generate within her feelings of surprise, sorrow, frustration, anger, resentment, and eventually the rejection that her husband mistakenly perceived. Thus, the husband, through the dynamic of distrust, creates his most significant fear. The loss of a mate or a friend or a colleague through distrust is not a punishment for distrustfulness. It is the result of refusing to look consciously within oneself at the issue of trust. It is an experience that results from choosing repeatedly to distrust instead of to trust. A distrustful person will create an unpleasant or painful situation until at last they bring him or her to the issue of trust. This may take 5 painful experiences, or a lifetime of painful experiences, or 50, or 5 lifetimes, or 50. And that didn't make sense the other way. But eventually, the path will lead to and through this great lesson of trust. The same dynamic applies to every personality characteristic that is not an expression of compassion or harmony. An angry personality, for example, will create unpleasant or even tragic situations until its anger is faced and removed as a block to compassion and love, to the energy of its own soul. The same is true for greedy personalities, selfish personalities, manipulating personalities, and so forth. This is the way we have evolved until now. So, in human development, the understanding of psychological human development, one of the things, Erik Erikson did work back in the 40s that talked about one of the first things that evolves in the new person, in the new child, is the issue of trust. That's the first stage of human development. And trust usually is developed within the first 9 to 15 months of life. Your basic sense of, is the world a safe and nurturing place, or is it something else? And if you decide it's something else, you tend to carry trust issues forward in your life. So these are a little deeper than we might be able to attack with logic. One thing about logic, you can give a very reasoned explanation or evidence about something, but if the heart doesn't agree, the heart doesn't agree. The heart is not affected by logic. You may have noticed. Okay, you may, not you, but other people in your life, you may have found them very difficult for them to accept something that you could see was obviously true. The classic example I give is you really might not want to date that guy. He seems dangerous. And the person in love with the guy says, I know he's on death row, but he's really just a misunderstood soul. And we do things like that because the heart wants something that may not be logical. And I'm not saying it's good, bad, or indifferent. It just is the way we are. And if we had trust issues as a child, they tend to carry forward into adult life. So what happens with trust issues, if you start out distrustful, and that's your default setting, Okay, that means that people have to earn your trust. They don't begin with it, they have to earn it. And here's what happens the way we proceed, because he talks about the idea, all this is a lesson unfolding, and until we get it, you're going to get the lesson. If I start out not trusting, I will make some really good choices about people who are not trustworthy. I'll also make some really bad choices about people that are trustworthy. And I'll also make some bad choices about people that aren't trustworthy, because I'll trust them mistakenly. When I start out trusting people, when I start out, before I get there, when you start out with distrust, anything unlike it strikes you as wrong. When you start out with trust, anything unlike it strikes you as wrong. So a person who starts out trusting will more likely pick up on the distrustful elements than the person who starts out distrusting, because they don't trust anybody. And it might seem practical, well, in today's world, you can't trust anybody. Well, that's not really true. And there are some relationships that simply will not thrive without trust. It may be fine not to trust your refrigerator repairman, to check up on the work and make sure they do it correctly and things like that. But if you don't trust the person you're in a significant relationship with, that's not so fine. That's problematical. If you don't trust your kids or your parents, that's a problem. So this idea of how we evolve through these processes is very critical, and trust is a huge issue. It starts, when we're a little kid and we learn that the world isn't safe, if that's our impression, what we don't trust is ourselves. We don't trust ourselves to navigate that world effectively. So the distrust, we then project that distrust onto other people. So the distrust I feel for other people is really ultimately not about them, it's about me. And the same with any of these, what he calls character issues. Jealousy is the same way. If I'm jealous, it has nothing to do really with the other person. It has to do with my own sense of I'm not lovable. Nobody would really, really love me. So therefore, if you do love me, you immediately become suspect. And I treat you like a suspect. And then guess what happens? Sometimes you say, well, hell with it, I'm going to have an affair. And I say, see, I was right to be jealous. But my jealousy was what incentivized the other person out of a lack of, because jealousy is a huge lack of trust. Now, some people, interestingly enough, are turned on by jealousy. They don't think the relationship's real unless the other person is jealous. The good news is that people like that will tend to be in a relationship with somebody equally as untrusting, and it keeps them off the market from other people. So that's that's not really a tragic thing. It's a law of attraction. Whoops, what happened here? Oh, I see. Okay. So another reading. And this is the last reading we're going to do. What is intuition and how does it work? Intuition is a perception beyond the physical senses that is meant to assist you. It is that sensory system which operates without data from the five senses. Your intuitional system is a part of your incarnation. When you leave your body, you will leave behind the intuitional system that was developed for you, as you will leave behind your personality, because it will no longer be necessary. Intuition serves many purposes. Intuition serves survival. It prompts you to pursue that which has no apparent reason in order to survive. Hunches about danger, for example, about what is risky and not, about which street is safe to walk and which is not, or about checking the car under the car hood, help you to remain safe in the physical world. Intuition serves creativity. It tells you what book to buy for your project. It tells you where to meet the colleague that you would need to meet, and which ideas from one field will complement which ideas from another. It is the hunch that a certain painting should be done in gray and that another should be done in purple. It is the sense that an idea has never been tried before, might work. Intuition serves inspiration. It is the sudden answer to a question. It is the meaning that takes form in the fog of confusion. It is the light that comes into the darkness. It is the presence of the divine. Intuition can be thought of as a type of wiring that can be used by various sources. One of these sources is the soul. Intuition is a walkie-talkie, so to speak, between the personality and the soul. This happens through the higher self. The higher self is the connecting link when the soul speaks to the personality. It is the dialogue between the personality and its immortal self. The personality-soul communication is the highest self-experience, but the personality does not communicate with the fullness of its soul. All of the energy of the soul does not incarnate. To incarnate, the soul creates a personality from these parts of itself that it wants to heal in the physical environment, and from those parts of itself that it lends to the process of healing in that lifetime. So intuition is that inner guidance system. It's sort of that inner message. I would say that hunches are a part of it, but a very small part of it. Hunches often come, actually wouldn't have been known at the time the book was written, but now there's much more psychological understanding. Hunches are more what you call meta experiences. A meta experience is something that's coming from your five senses and your memory and your experience, but it's not directly connected to any of it. So you might get a hunch as you're driving down the road that I need to turn left here for some reason, and you do, and you find out there was something ahead that you missed, or you run into your Uncle Gus that you haven't seen for 28 years or something like that. That's a more shallow element of your subconscious. The deep intuition, however, comes from the deepest part of you. And usually you can tell you're in an intuitive knowing space because the information shows up complete. You get an answer to something that's been on your mind. You might wake up with it or be driving down the road and it pops into your head. And it's almost too much to handle. I got to remember all this stuff. I might have to pull over and write some notes down. It's not just little dribs and drabs. Many of us, again, were conditioned at youth not to have that pipeline open very well, to be practical, usually is the way it's described. So we over time stopped trusting our intuitive voice or stopped listening to it. So it also is tied into trust. So one of the things you want to do in spiritual practice, in your treatment work, in your meditation, in your contemplation, is to actively sort of romance your intuitive self, to create an invitation for that deeper knowing to be more available to you, and to maybe step out onto the skinny branches sometimes when you do get an intuitive idea that sounds a little crazy, and just try it. You know, crazy is subjective to different people. For some people it might be, you're at a party, I think I should go talk to that person across the room. Well, that would be crazy, for me to do, because I never talk to people I don't know. For other people, crazy might be a whole nother, standard deviation away from that. But the point is, one of the ways we cultivate a greater connection with our intuition is being willing, when we're called from within, to take what appears to be a greater risk. Not when you're challenged from without, when you're called from within. And there's a difference there. So this intuitive piece ties in. He talks about light. Light being, as we talk about here a lot, light being sort of, you might call it the universal energy. Light, as he uses it, and as Ernest Holmes uses it, usually with a capital L, light is all energy in the physical realm and all energy beyond that realm. So it's sort of the basic building block of us, of any creation that exists, and we are always directing light into form. Another term you could use for that energy is love, or you could just call it energy, whatever you're comfortable with. It doesn't care, because it just is what it is. But when you think about it, how do we manifest what we manifest and who we are? Just look around the room. How do we all get here? How did we all grow? You know, where do we come from? What's fueling us? You know, it's not the burrito you had for breakfast. You know, that's part of the deal. But there's something more fueling what you're thinking about now, and what you're feeling, and how you go through your experience, your life, and how we connect, and all the other stuff that's going on in this vast universe. So this idea of light will be defined as that essential element that everything consists of, and that everything uses to express. So the energy that becomes your body, and also the energy that animates your life, is light, as he's talking about here. He said the light that flows through your system is universal energy. You give that light form. What you feel, what you think, how you behave, what you value, and how you live your life reflect the way that you are shaping the light that is flowing through you. So you and I are devices that give shape to light into manifest form. And that would be not just stuff, but it would also be experience and feelings and all the other elements that it is to be alive. So the creative process is saying all of this light energy is continually available, it's continually flowing. We're continually creating with our mind. The only question is, what is the quality of that which we're creating? All spiritual practice, all philosophy is about learning to create more positively, more upliftingly, more with greater value. Because no other part of the creative process is subject to change. You're not going to change the amount of energy there is, it's infinite. You're not going to change the tendency of that energy to express, because that seems to be a built-in bias in the universal system. You're not going to change the fact that you as a physical being are expressing energy of various kinds, including physical, into the world around you. The only thing we can affect is how we do that and what we do with it. So again, the analogy, and I know I've used this a million times, is the electricity flowing into the building. Think of that as that light energy. And it flows into the building, and it doesn't know where it's going. It doesn't know what it's going to become. It's completely receptive, you might say. And it flows in, and some of it goes into the exit sign, and something in that exit sign, that if you're an electrician you would understand what it is, I don't, converts that electricity to the light that shows up in that exit sign. Other electricity flows into the lights in the ceiling, into the screen, into Andy's keyboard, and a trickle is going into the air conditioning. No, here's the analogy. An infinite amount is going in to the air conditioning. The air conditioning is not doing much with it. So the same energy flows into and becomes the exit sign, becomes the power that powers the exit sign, which manifests as that. Something in the TV turns it into that display. Something in the lights turns it into that display. Same electricity going into all these different things. So the same power that you're using in your life is the same power that every human being on the planet is using in their life. And the only difference is what you're doing with it. So all the capacity to do something and giving the light form exists within you. You're that part of the creative process of the universe whose job it is to create a human experience out of raw, undifferentiated light energy. And you do it perfectly. You do it 24/7. You can't stop doing it. The question is, how are you doing it? What's the quality? You know, where are you aiming? Are you a light? Or are you an air conditioner that's stumbling along, wasting most of its energy? Are you like a laser beam focused on things, or are you kind of diffuse and whatever happens, happens? Are you coming from a place of deciding to use your life to uplift others? Or are you in a place of using the lives of others to try to uplift you? Same energy, same flow, there's no restriction. The only place we have any influence at all is at the point of our consciousness, which gives form to the light. So I don't have to do anything in my practice to say I need energy. Can't get any more than I've got. I don't need to do anything in my practice to say deliver the energy into my being. It's there. I don't need to do anything in my practice to say, it would be like saying, let me pray to have my heart beat today. Well, if you're here, your heart's beating, right? Because it's its nature to do that. It's the nature of the divine energy to flow into our being and for us to give it form and direction. It's how we choose to do that that is our point of power. So that's the important thing in the creative process. It says you change the way that you shape the light flowing through you by changing your consciousness. You change your consciousness by thinking and feeling in a new direction. You know, if I wanted to say, well, you know what? I don't want this corner light here. Let's take that out, and into that socket, let's plug a little fan. I could use that about now. Well, if we did that and, complied with the laws, in other words, the voltage was right and everything, and I unplugged the light and plugged in a fan, what would happen? I'd get cool air, or air. Right? And the electricity coming through the line wouldn't say, whoa, 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 I was looking for light here. I got to back down this wire and go down another wire where the light is. No, it doesn't do that. It doesn't have any consciousness of its own. It always says yes in the sense that it's always fully available. It doesn't. So the point is this. Some of us are angry at God. And it stifles our creative ability, because being angry at God is like being angry at the electricity for being the exit sign and not the TV. God cannot withhold. The universe itself cannot withhold. You're alive. That's the proof of that. At some point, the physical body is going to be done. Okay? But while you're here, the only thing that matters is what you do at that point of consciousness. That's what this is about. Every experience and every change in your experience reflects an intention. An intention is not only a desire, it is the use of your will. An intention is where I say, not just, gee, I really wish I had some better stuff in my life. I could say, gee, I really wish it was cooler in here. Or I could say, now if I had to set an intention, it's going to be cooler in here, I'd be on the phone to somebody. Or I'd be saying, is there an air conditioner person in the room? Is there? Well, you got a couple cans of Freon in your car. You know what I mean? An intention means it's going to be followed with action. An intention means that I'm clear about understanding my own power. Because if I don't understand my own power, if I have huge trust issues, I won't form an intention because I'm afraid it won't work. So an intention has to come out of a sense of strength and a sense of understanding that I have the capacity to direct my experience. To be a true intention. And an intention also has to come from the awareness of how things work. All I need to do is change my point of consciousness. I don't need to get the energy flowing. I don't need to have the energy agree to become a cooler room. It'll just do it. It'll just do it. So many people have been taught that nothing happens unless God says yes. And they've also been taught that God says no a lot. That anytime something doesn't work the way it wanted to, God said no. Well, that's a hugely destructive way to think. Because that's like saying if the light burns out, I guess the electricity said no to that light. No, of course not. We know better than that. Well, spirit, God, whatever name you want to give it, or no name, the all that is, cannot withhold the energy that activates the universe because it's its nature to flow. I don't have to worry about that. If I'm worried about whether or not I'll have enough energy to do what I want to do, I'm worried about the wrong thing. And that can derail my capacity to express from strength. Does that make sense? A little? Intention shapes light. Intention set light into motion. You know, we have these lights on the stage and we have the TV because somebody had an intention to build something specific. And they messed around with it, and, until it didn't blow up. Or until it worked right. And then they put it out into the world. Well, the same thing we're doing with our life experiences, with our relationships. We kind of mess around with them to see, how they work, if I act this way and you act that way and all that stuff. And then eventually, hopefully, you rise up through a process of getting to the best version of who and what you are, and the relationship takes on that new level. Same energy. It takes the same energy to have a great relationship as it does to have a lousy relationship or no relationship. The fuel is the same. It's the conscious outcome, the conscious direction of the creation of consciousness subjectively that determines how it shows up. Each intention, anger, greed, jealousy, compassion, or understanding, sets energy into motion, sets patterns of light into motion. Physical matter is the densest and heaviest form of this light. So your thought energy, the energy in your thoughts is the same energy it's in the chair you're sitting in. It's just in a different level of vibration. There's only one energy in the whole universe. Einstein proved that. E = mc2 says matter is energy, just in a denser form. Your thoughts are fine energy. They had the most power to change. The denser the energy is, the harder is it for it to change. Try to make that chair into a boat. Wouldn't be easy, would it? But you can think from chair to boat just like that. No heavy lifting required. So why can't we change our thoughts? Because we think we can't? Well, I tried once. It was really hard. So what is your intention? What are the intentions that you're setting in every moment, whether you're paying attention or not? When you label something as being a certain way, you're actually setting an intention for your relationship with that thing. Whatever it is, from traffic sucks to my kids are incredible beings of light. And when do we set the labels? We set the labels when we're in our 5 sensory mode. When we're simply operating at the surface level. And for some of us, that surface level is no deeper than a mud puddle. The inner, the multisensory, takes us into the depths. Takes us down to the deepest part of our being, which is where all the action is, quite frankly, where all the intelligence is, where all the love is. When I used to be at the center in Baltimore, we met at a swim club that had this wonderful building for catering that we would rent on Sunday mornings. And people would say, well, where's your center? I'd say, it's at the Padonia Park Swim Club. They said, well, where do you meet at the swim club? I said, in the deep end. Yeah, this community is about being in the deep end, because it's the only place where anything's happening. In the shallow end, it's just a bunch of splashing around and kids peeing. That's where reality TV is, and a lot of other stuff that we spend our time doing is the shallow end, and no wonder it's not fulfilling. No wonder you get a crappy attitude if you spend a lot of time there. Because it's full of people with crappy attitudes. The deep end is very different, you see, and we're all meant to be there. We are beings of great depth. So this particular part of this particular book was about being in the deep end, This doesn't pertain to anything I'm talking about. I just thought it was cool. Life's tough. Get a helmet. So what is your helmet? Your helmet is your spiritual practice. Your helmet is your consciousness that I am enough. Your helmet is your consciousness that Spirit always says yes to whatever I set into motion. It says yes. So if my life isn't working, it's not like I have to look at the world and say, oh, the world is making my life not work. The world doesn't do that. The world cooperates. In fact, whatever your life is doing, it's working from a consciousness perspective. You just might prefer that it work in a different way, but the law's working perfectly. So yeah, sometimes we got to put on our helmet. Sometimes we're going into the unknown, and there is fear there. We need to move through that. We need to move past it. We need to move beyond it. There is no circumstance that is greater than I am. Say that with me. There is no circumstance that is greater than I am. There isn't. You have the power to say there is, but it's your power that makes that seem so, not the nature of things. I am not moved by appearances, therefore appearances move. Let's say that together. I am not moved by appearances, therefore appearances move. Yes, they do. They move all the time. So we can go from life to is tough, get a helmet, and we can also say life is beautiful. It just is. Thank you, and namaste.